The auditorium was silent except for the soft sound of the piano keys being pressed. A young girl sat at the grand piano on the stage, her small hands moving carefully over the keys. Her heart was racing. The light above her felt hot, and she could feel every eye in the hall staring at her. It was the regional music competition, something she had dreamed about for years. For her, this wasn't just a contest. It was a chance to show what she loved most in the world. She had practiced for months, sometimes until her fingers hurt. She didn't come from a rich family. Her piano at home was old, its keys slightly uneven, but she didn't care. It had belonged to her late mother, and that made it special. The judges sat in a straight line in front of the stage, papers and pens in their hands. Most of them looked serious, but one stood out, an older man with sharp eyes and a face that never smiled. Everyone in town knew who he was. He was a retired musician, now one of the toughest judges in the region. People said he didn't care about emotions, only perfection. He was known for stopping students in the middle of their performance if he didn't like what he heard. The girl had heard those stories too, but she tried not to think about them. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. The melody was soft and gentle, like a whisper carried by the wind. It was a piece she had learned from her mother's old sheet music, one she felt connected to in her heart. For a moment, the audience listened quietly. Some smiled, moved by the sweetness of her playing. But before she could even reach the middle of the song, a loud sound cut through the hall. "Stop!" The word came from the older judge. His voice was firm, cold, and without emotion. The girl froze, her hands still resting on the keys. He leaned forward, his brows furrowed. "That's enough," he said flatly. "You're playing it all wrong." The girl blinked, unsure what to say. I'm sorry," she stammered softly. "I was just—" He waved his hand impatiently. "You're not focusing on structure. The rhythm is off, your tempo is uneven, and you're adding feelings that don't belong there. This isn't how music is meant to be played." The hall fell completely silent. Everyone could feel the tension. The other judges glanced at one another, but no one dared to speak. The girl's throat tightened. She could feel tears pressing behind her eyes, but she tried to stay calm. "I thought music was about feeling," she whispered. The judge gave a small, cold laugh. "Feeling? Music is about precision, discipline, not your personal emotions." The girl lowered her head. She didn't understand how someone could say that. Her mother had always told her that music came from the heart, not from the hands. But now, standing on that big stage, she felt small. Smaller than ever before. "Step down," the judge said firmly. "Next performer." The young girl slowly rose from the piano bench, her fingers trembling. She looked out at the audience. Some people stared at her with pity, others with indifference. She tried to smile, but it didn't come out right. She walked off the stage quietly, each step feeling heavier than the last. When she reached the backstage area, she sat down on a wooden chair and stared at her hands. Her fingers still tingled from the keys. She could hear faint applause from the next performer, but it sounded distant, like an echo from another world. She thought about her mother, how she used to play late at night when the house was quiet. Her mother's music had always been full of emotion, soft but powerful. She remembered sitting beside her as a little girl, watching her mother's hands move across the keys, each note carrying a piece of her heart. Now, sitting backstage, she wished her mother was still there. Maybe she would know what to do. Maybe she would tell her not to give up. The rehearsal ended soon after, and people began leaving the hall. Some of the other contestants passed by, whispering to one another. She could tell they were talking about her, but she didn't mind. What hurt wasn't their gossip. It was that the judge had looked at her music and found it worthless. Outside, the evening light poured through the windows. She sat near the door, clutching the worn-out music book her mother had left her. Its edges were torn and the pages were yellowed, but it was her most precious treasure. When she opened it, she saw her mother's handwriting, little notes written in the margins. "Play softly here. Feel the emotion. Let it breathe." Each line felt like her mother's voice speaking to her again. She turned to a page she had always loved. At the top was a simple title written in faded ink, a melody her mother had composed long ago. It wasn't a famous song, but every time she played it, it brought her comfort. She hadn't played it in years, not since her mother passed away. But now something inside her wanted to. She placed her music book on her lap and whispered, Maybe I'll play this tomorrow. Just for you, Mom. At that moment, one of the other judges walked past. She was a kind woman who had noticed the incident earlier. She stopped and said gently, "You played beautifully, you know." The girl looked up, surprised. "But he said I played it wrong." The judge smiled kindly. Sometimes people forget that music isn't just about rules. Don't lose your heart because of one harsh word. If you believe in what you play, then play it again. For yourself. The girl nodded slowly. Those words settled deep inside her. She realized she still had one last chance, or the final performance the next day. She would play her mother's song. She didn't care about winning anymore. She just wanted to play something real, something that meant something to her. That night she sat at home, the old piano gleaming softly under the warm light. The house was quiet. Her father was asleep, tired from work, and the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. She ran her fingers across the keys. The first note came out softly, almost like a sigh. Then the next followed. Soon the room filled with a melody that seemed to float in the air, gentle, deep, and full of love. As she played, she felt her mother's presence beside her, guiding her, smiling at her. For the first time since the harsh judge had stopped her, she smiled again. She didn't feel nervous anymore. The music was her comfort, her home. The next morning, when she arrived at the hall again, the stage didn't feel as frightening. The same old judge sat in his place, his face unreadable. The girl didn't look at him this time. She looked at the piano instead, the instrument she loved most. As she sat down, she whispered quietly, "This one's for you, Mom." The lights dimmed. The audience settled. The judge leaned back, clearly not expecting much. But as her fingers touched the keys, something about her felt different, calmer, stronger. She wasn't playing to impress anyone now. She was playing to remember. The melody began to flow like a river, carrying every emotion she had ever felt. Love, loss, hope, and longing. The sound spread through the hall, reaching even the farthest corners. For now, no one interrupted her. No one spoke. The harsh judge, the one who had once silenced her, leaned forward without realizing it. There was something familiar in the notes, something that tugged at his memory. But that moment, that change, it was still to come. Right now, all that existed was a young girl and her piano, two souls speaking the same language. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if she'd win or be ignored again. But deep down, she had already found what she came for: courage. And for the first time since her mother's passing, she felt at peace. The next morning, the girl woke up early. The sun was barely rising, and a thin layer of fog covered the street outside. Her house was small and quiet, but it was filled with the smell of old wood and faint traces of her mother's favorite perfume that still lingered in the walls. She stood near the piano, the one her mother had played for years. It was scratched and a little out of tune, but it still carried the warmth of her mother's hands. She gently opened the music book again. The pages were worn, the corners soft from years of turning. Her eyes rested on the same song she had chosen the night before, the one her mother had written. It had no grand title, no famous composer's name. Just a few simple words in her mother's handwriting at the top, "For someone who still believes." She smiled faintly when she read that. Her mother used to say that music could heal anything, even pain. Back then, she didn't really understand what that meant. But now she did. She understood what it felt like to carry pain and turn it into something beautiful. She sat down and began to play. The first few notes were soft, uncertain. But then slowly the melody began to bloom. Her fingers moved gracefully, guided by memory and emotion. She wasn't counting beats or worrying about mistakes. She was just letting her heart speak. As she played, tears quietly rolled down her cheeks. The song reminded her of nights when her mother would hum the tune while cooking, or when she would tuck her in, whispering softly, "Listen to the music. It's part of you." When she finished, the house felt quiet again. But this time it wasn't an empty silence. It felt peaceful, like her mother's spirit was sitting beside her. Proud and smiling, she closed the piano lid and whispered, "I'll play it for you today." Later that afternoon, she arrived at the music hall. The competition was reaching its final round. Contestants were gathered in the hallway, tuning instruments, checking notes, some whispering nervously to themselves. The same strict judge sat at the front, reading his notes from the day before. His expression was cold, distant, as if the music around him didn't matter anymore. When the girl entered, a few other participants gave her curious looks. Some whispered about how the judge had stopped her the previous day. A few even smirked. She pretended not to notice. Her focus wasn't on them. She only thought about her mother's song. She sat quietly, holding her music book close to her chest. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her heart felt calm. The announcer began calling names one by one. Each contestant took the stage, playing their pieces, some loud and dramatic, others quick and technical. The judges nodded politely, took notes, and moved on. But the older judge barely reacted. He looked bored, his eyes tired. When her name was finally called, the girl felt her stomach twist. She took a deep breath, clutched the music sheet, and walked toward the stage. The hall lights dimmed slightly, and a quiet hush fell over the audience. She could hear her own footsteps echo as she walked across the wooden floor. She bowed politely before sitting down at the grand piano. Her hands hovered above the keys. The same judge who had stopped her before looked at her over his glasses and sighed. "You're back," he said in a low voice. "I hope you're more prepared this time." She nodded politely. "Yes, sir. I'd like to play one more time." "Just this piece," he shrugged, clearly uninterested. "You may begin." For a moment she just sat there, staring at the keys. She remembered her mother's voice in her head. "Don't play to impress. Play to speak." Then, with a slow breath, she began. The first note rang softly in the air, then another. The melody was gentle, simple, almost like a lullaby. The audience leaned in, expecting something quiet and ordinary. But as the song continued, something began to change. Each note carried emotion, raw, honest, pure. The melody grew fuller, more alive. Her hands moved gracefully. Her eyes half closed as if she could see her mother through the music. The sound filled the entire hall, wrapping everyone in warmth and sadness at the same time. Even the chatter in the back stopped. People who had been whispering fell silent. There was something different about this song. It didn't sound like a competition piece. It sounded like a story being told without words. The old judge sat still, staring at her. His pen had stopped moving. His eyes, which had looked so cold earlier, slowly began to soften. The melody touched something deep inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. As the girl reached the middle of the song, her voice broke softly as she whispered under her breath, "This is for you, Mom." The judge heard it. His fingers tightened on the armrest. The melody changed slightly, becoming more emotional, more personal. The rhythm was not perfect, but it didn't matter. It was real. Every sound carried a story of love, of loss, of holding on when everything else fades. The judge blinked several times. Something about the music felt familiar. The pattern, the tone, even the pauses between phrases. It all echoed a song he once knew. His late wife used to play something just like this. She had written a melody years ago, a song filled with love and sorrow, and she used to play it on rainy nights when they sat together in their small apartment. He hadn't heard it in years. Not since she passed away. Now, hearing this young girl play something so similar, he felt his heart twist. His chest felt heavy, and he didn't know why. He looked down, hiding his face from the other judges. The girl continued to play, unaware of what was happening. She wasn't thinking of the audience or the judges anymore. She was lost in the music, in her memories, in her love for her mother. When she reached the final notes, she held them softly, letting them fade into silence. The sound lingered in the air long after her fingers had stopped moving. No one clapped immediately. The hall was completely still. Then slowly the audience began to applaud, softly at first, then louder, growing into a wave of emotion that filled the hall. Some people stood up. Others wiped away tears, but the old judge didn't move. He just sat there staring at the piano. His hands were shaking slightly. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Grief, love, and longing all at once. The girl looked at him, confused by his silence. She wasn't sure if she had done something wrong. But then she saw it, a tear falling down his cheek. He stood up slowly, unable to speak. The other judges looked at him in surprise. He turned to the girl, his lips trembling, but no words came out. The girl bowed her head respectfully, clutching her music book close. She didn't know what was happening, but she felt something shift in the room. Something bigger than applause. Something deeper than winning. She quietly stepped off the stage, her heart pounding, and went backstage. The kind judge from the day before met her with a soft smile. "You did beautifully," she said. That was more than music. The girl looked down, shyly smiling. "I just played what I felt," the woman nodded. "And that's exactly what music should be." Meanwhile, the older judge stayed seated for a long time, staring at the empty stage. The melody still echoed in his mind. He couldn't shake it. It felt as if the past had returned and touched him once again, through the hands of a young girl he had nearly silenced. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "That song, how does she know it?" But no one had an answer. That night, when the competition ended, he walked out of the hall and stood under the streetlights, the cool wind brushing against his face. The same melody played in his head over and over again. He realized that maybe music wasn't just about perfection after all. Maybe it was about memory, about love that refuses to fade. He didn't know yet that the girl's mother and his late wife were connected. But something inside him already told him there was more to her story. And for the first time in many years, he felt something stir inside his heart, the beginning of understanding, and maybe redemption. The hall was quiet now, the echoes of the piano fading like a soft whisper that refused to leave the air. The girl stepped back from the stage, her hands trembling slightly, but a calmness had replaced the fear she had felt before. She didn't yet understand what had just happened, but she could sense that something had shifted in the room. The audience slowly began to rise, clapping gently at first, and then more steadily. There were whispers, gasps, even a few sniffles. People looked around at each other as if trying to confirm that what they had just heard was real. Some older musicians, seasoned judges themselves, shook their heads in disbelief. It wasn't the technical mastery that impressed them. It was the feeling, the honesty, the pure heart behind the music. But the one person everyone was waiting to react to was the older judge. The man who had scolded her so harshly the day before. The man who had the reputation of being unmovable, unfeeling, and cold. And yet there he sat, frozen in his chair, his eyes fixed on the empty stage. He didn't move. He didn't blink for what felt like an eternity. His hand rested on the arm of his chair, slightly trembling, as if the very air had become too heavy to bear. No one had ever seen him like this. People whispered quietly, wondering if he had even recognized the melody. The girl, backstage now, was unaware of the storm she had stirred inside him. She thought she had just played a song, one her mother had written, to honor her memory. She had wanted to feel close to her mother again, to let the music speak for what words could not, and somehow, unknowingly, that music had reached someone else's heart in ways she could never have imagined. The older judge slowly rose from his seat. Each movement was deliberate, careful, almost as if he was trying to remember how to move his own body. His face was pale and a subtle tremor ran through his lips. He walked toward the stage, past the other judges, and paused at the foot of it. The audience was still clapping, but a hush quickly fell when they noticed his expression. This was not admiration or casual praise. This was something deeper, something raw. His hands, normally steady and commanding, were now shaking slightly. He looked at the piano, then at the empty seat where the girl had been playing. For the first time in years, he felt speechless. He remembered the song. The melody, every delicate note, stirred a memory that had been buried deep inside him. A memory of evenings spent with his wife sitting in their small living room, listening to her play the same tune. He had loved that song, not just because of its beauty, but because it carried her laughter, her gentle voice, the warmth of her presence. And now, decades later, he heard it again. Unexpectedly, played by the daughter of someone he barely knew. The hall seemed to shrink around him. He could hear nothing but the memory of the music, as if it were playing in his mind on repeat. The notes were the same, but the hands were different. He realized that the song had been preserved, carried through time by someone who had loved it as much as he once did. The girl, unaware of the effect she had caused, was quietly taking a seat backstage, hugging her music book. Her heart was racing, but for a different reason than before. This time it wasn't fear or nerves. It was hope, a small flicker of hope that perhaps she had finally played something meaningful. The older judge stood frozen at the base of the stage, lost in thought. His breathing was uneven. His mind raced with memories of his wife, Her gentle smile, the soft touch of her hand as she adjusted his tie or smoothed his hair. And the music, always the music, had been her way of speaking to him without words. He walked closer to the piano, almost instinctively, and placed a hand lightly on the polished wood. The echo of her notes seemed to vibrate beneath his fingers. His eyes closed, and for a moment he was back in that small apartment, sitting beside his wife, listening to her play. He could feel the warmth, the comfort, the unspoken love in every note. The audience had noticed his strange behavior. Some were whispering to one another. "Is he okay?" one person asked. "Why isn't he clapping?" another murmured. But a few of the older judges exchanged knowing looks. They had seen this before, rarely when music reached a place deeper than skill, a place untouched by time, a place of memory and emotion. The older judge slowly turned his gaze toward the girl. She was still sitting backstage, her eyes downcast. She looked smaller now, almost fragile, yet her presence filled the room with something powerful, something alive. He could not speak at first. Words felt inadequate. How could he describe the flood of memories, the ache in his chest, the long-lost warmth that had returned with just a few notes? Finally, he cleared his throat, his voice low and unsteady. Where did you learn that song?" The girl looked up, startled by the question. She hadn't expected anyone to speak to her, especially not him. It's from my mother's music sheets," she said softly. "She wrote it years ago." He blinked, trying to process the information. "Your mother wrote this song?" She nodded. "Yes, she passed it to me. I've been learning it for a long time." The older judge's hand trembled as he lowered it from the piano. He could hardly breathe. It's the same song my wife used to play," he said, his voice barely audible. "The same one I haven't heard in years." The girl's eyes widened. She didn't understand fully, but she could see that her music had touched him in a way she had never imagined. She didn't know what to say. She only knew that she had played from her heart, and somehow it had reached someone else's heart too. The audience remained silent, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. This was no longer just a competition. It was a moment suspended in time where music had bridged generations, pain and love. The older judge walked closer to her now, carefully, almost reverently. "Your mother, she knew my wife?" he asked. His voice cracked slightly. The girl nodded slowly. She was one of her closest students. She loved her music. She always said she wanted to keep it alive." He swallowed hard, emotions flooding over him. I didn't know." He paused, looking at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. I'm so sorry for how I treated you yesterday. I was wrong." Tears welled up in the girl's eyes. She had expected anger or disappointment, not this. It's okay," she whispered. I just wanted to play it." He nodded, almost unable to speak. He felt years of bitterness and grief melting away, replaced by something warm and fragile. You've reminded me," he said quietly, "of something I thought I had lost forever. Your mother. Your music." It brought her back to me, even for a moment. The girl didn't fully understand, but she felt the weight of his words. Her music. Something so personal and small to her had reached across years and pain to touch someone's soul. She realized then that music was not just notes and rhythm. It was memory. It was love. It was life itself. The audience, finally understanding the significance of the moment, began to clap softly. The sound was gentle at first, then louder, but the applause was not for winning a contest. It was for witnessing something rare, something profound. The older judge stood there, letting the music of memory wash over him. For the first time in decades, he felt hope. Hope that love could persist through time, through loss, through silence. And he realized that the young girl before him, shy, nervous, and small, had given him that gift. The girl, holding her mother's music book close, felt a quiet pride. She had played what she loved, what she believed in, what she remembered. And somehow it had been enough. It had been more than enough. As she stepped back, the older judge finally managed to speak, his voice steadier now. "Thank you," he said simply. "For the music, for reminding me." She nodded shyly. "Thank you for listening," she replied. The hall seemed to breathe again. The tension lifted, replaced by a quiet reverence. It was a moment that would be remembered by everyone present. A young girl playing a song from her mother, and an older man frozen in awe. touched in a way he thought was impossible. The girl left the stage that day knowing something important. She understood now that music was not just about applause, competition, or approval. It was about connection. It was about speaking from the heart, and sometimes it could reach places even words could not. And somewhere, deep inside the older judge, the memory of his wife, long buried in grief, began to awaken, guided back by the simple, honest melody of a young girl who played with love. The hall had finally calmed after the young girl's performance. The applause had faded, leaving behind a quiet hum of awe and curiosity. People whispered softly, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. But the older judge was the only one whose thoughts were tangled in a mix of shock, recognition, and a strange warmth he hadn't felt in decades. He remained seated for a moment, staring at the piano where the girl had played. His fingers still rested lightly on the polished surface, as if he could feel the echo of the notes lingering in the wood. Slowly he got up, walking carefully toward the backstage area where the girl was sitting quietly, hugging her music book. Her eyes were downcast, but she sensed his presence immediately. He paused a few feet away, unsure how to begin. His voice, when it finally came, was softer than anyone had ever heard it. "Your mother, she knew my wife?" The girl looked up, startled by the sudden question. She nodded slowly. "Yes, they were very close. My mother. She was one of her students, and my mother loved her music. She wanted to keep it alive even after she passed away." The older judge's eyes widened, and he took a step closer. She gave this song to you?" His voice trembled. "The same song?" "Yes," the girl whispered. "She taught me when I was very little. I've kept it safe all these years." A deep silence followed. The judge stared at her, his mind racing with memories of his wife. He remembered the soft evenings spent in their apartment, the dim light casting shadows on the walls, and the melody that had once filled every corner of the room. That song, delicate, emotional, yet full of life, had been her gift to him, her way of speaking when words were not enough. And now, hearing it again in the hands of this young girl, he felt the past rush back as if it had never left. Tears formed in his eyes. He had spent years avoiding memories, convinced that grief meant he had to shut them out. But now, in this quiet music hall, the past had returned, alive, tender, and unmistakable. "Your mother, she was the one who preserved this song?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she said softly, her own tears beginning to fall. She wanted it to be remembered. She always said that music lives through people who love it. The older judge could hardly speak. He felt a mixture of regret, awe, and gratitude. All at once he realized how harsh he had been the day before. He had stopped her mid-performance, dismissing her emotions, not knowing that the girl's music carried something far more profound than mere technique. I treated you unfairly yesterday," he said finally, his voice breaking slightly. I was cold and I didn't understand." The girl shook her head gently. "It's okay, I understand why you stopped me. I wanted to play it one more time." He nodded slowly. "Yes, and you did. You played not just notes, but life itself. You reminded me of her, and now I remember something I thought was lost forever." The girl's eyes softened. "I'm glad," she said quietly. "I didn't know it would affect you like this." He looked down at her, still overwhelmed. "I never expected that a young girl could carry something so precious. You brought my wife back to me, if only for a moment. And for that I am grateful." She smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and humility. "It's just a song," she said softly. "But it's more than that. It's memories, love. Everything my mother wanted to keep alive." The judge nodded. "Yes, it's everything." The other judges, who had been watching from a distance, finally stepped closer. They too had been moved by what had just happened. One of them, a kind older woman, spoke gently. "This is extraordinary. Not because of technical skill, but because of heart. She played with soul, with memory, with love. That is rare." The girl looked down at her music book again, hugging it tightly. "I just wanted to honor my mother," she said softly. "You've done more than honor her," the older judge said quietly. "You've reminded all of us what music is truly about, and you've reminded me of someone I thought I had lost." He paused, then asked slowly, "Your mother, did she ever tell you about my wife?" "Yes," the girl said. "She said she was her teacher, her guide, and that she gave her the song to keep safe. She trusted me to continue it, to play it when the time felt right." The judge took a deep breath, letting the weight of it all settle. He felt a sense of connection he had not expected. A bridge between the past and the present, between loss and memory, between grief and love. Then, he said slowly, his voice gaining strength, You have done exactly what she would have wanted. And now I want to know everything. I want to know your mother. I want to know how she preserved this song. I want to understand how it came to you. The girl nodded, a quiet excitement growing inside her. For the first time, she felt that her music was truly understood, not just by the audience, but by someone who had lived through the same emotions, the same love, the same loss. I can tell you everything, she said softly. My mother, she always said that music is more than notes. It's feelings, memories, life itself. She wanted people to feel it, not just hear it. The older judge's eyes glistened. She was wise, and she was brave too to entrust this to you. I never realized how precious this song was until now. He paused, then added almost in awe, And you've done it beautifully. Every note, every pause, every soft touch of the keys. It was her. And now it is you too. The girl felt warmth spread through her chest. She had spent so long trying to please judges, trying to prove herself, worrying about mistakes and timing. But in this moment, she realized that none of that mattered. What mattered was truth, emotion, love, and memory. She had given all of that, and it had reached someone who truly understood. The older judge looked at her, his expression now soft, almost tender. I want to apologize again for yesterday. I was harsh, and I didn't see the music for what it really is. You've taught me a lesson I will never forget. The girl smiled faintly. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath as if trying to steady himself. There is something I must do. I want to meet your mother, to learn about her, to see the person who kept this song alive, and I want you to continue playing it. Not just here, but wherever you can. Share it, keep it alive. It deserves that. The girl's eyes widened. I will. I promise. The judge smiled faintly, a rare warmth shining in his eyes. Good. Then we have a connection now, you, your mother, and me. A song that bridges the past and the present. A song that holds love, memory, and life itself. At that moment, the hall seemed to feel lighter. The heavy tension of the morning, the coldness of criticism, the fear and anxiety of the girl, all of it had dissolved. Music had done what words could not. It had healed. It had connected. It had revealed a truth deeper than any judgment could reach. The girl hugged her music book to her chest again, feeling a sense of purpose she had never felt before. She realized that her mother's gift was more than just a song. It was a bridge to understanding, to connection, and to love that refused to fade. The older judge stepped back slightly, still in awe. You've done more than play a song, he said softly. You've reminded me of life, love, and the beauty of memory. Thank you. The girl nodded quietly, a smile breaking through the tears on her face. I'm glad. The kind judge who had supported her earlier approached, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You've not only played beautifully, but you've touched hearts today. Remember this feeling. This is what music is truly for. The older judge lingered a moment longer, his eyes fixed on the girl. He knew that this moment, this connection, would stay with him forever. For the first time in years, he felt hope, gratitude, and a renewed sense of purpose. Music had given him back something he thought was lost. Love, memory, and the recognition that beauty can survive even the harshest judgment. The girl took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. She had faced criticism, doubt, and fear, but she had stayed true to herself and to her mother's gift. And now she understood something important. Music was not about winning, not about impressing anyone, not about perfection. Music was about heart, memory, and the power to reach someone's soul. And in that quiet hall, amidst whispers and fading applause, two lives, and hers and his, had been forever changed by a song, a memory, and a young girl brave enough to play from her heart. The hall was quiet now, but the silence was different this time. It was full of meaning, full of life, full of the echoes of a song that had touched hearts. The young girl stood backstage, holding her mother's music book close. Her hands were trembling slightly, but it wasn't fear or anxiety this time. It was hope, pride, and a sense of purpose she had never felt before. The older judge, the one who had scolded her harshly the day before, was still standing near the stage, watching her. His expression had softened completely. The tension in his shoulders had disappeared, replaced by a warmth that no one in the hall had ever seen before. He looked at her with awe, gratitude, and something else. Respect. Deep respect. For the first time, he spoke without hesitation. "You've reminded me of something I thought I lost forever. Your mother. Your music. It has given me a gift I never expected." "Thank you." The girl's eyes widened. She hadn't expected gratitude. She had only wanted to play a song that mattered to her. I'm glad it helped," she whispered softly. He nodded slowly. "Helped? It has done more than that. It has reminded me of love, of memory, of the beauty that remains even after loss. And it has reminded everyone here that music is not just notes. Music is heart, and you have the biggest heart I have ever seen in a performer." The girl felt tears prick her eyes. She had faced criticism, cold words, and doubt. But in that moment, everything felt right. She realized that her music had reached someone's soul. She had connected with another human being in a way words never could. The audience, who had been quietly watching, began to clap again. This time it wasn't just polite applause. It was full of respect, admiration, and awe. People stood, some even wiping away tears, moved not just by her playing, but by the story they had witnessed unfold. A story of loss, love, and music bridging the gap between generations. The older judge cleared his throat, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I must apologize to you publicly," he said, turning to the young girl and then addressing the hall. "Yesterday I was harsh and unfair. I judged too quickly without seeing the music for what it truly is. Today I have learned that music is not just precision, but feeling. Not just performance, but soul. This young girl has reminded us all of that. She has reminded me in particular of a love I thought I had lost forever." The hall erupted in applause again. The girl blushed and bowed her head, feeling a mix of shyness and pride. She didn't care about the competition anymore. She didn't care about who won or lost. She only cared that she had played from her heart, and that her music had reached someone who truly understood. The older judge stepped closer to her, his eyes glistening. "I want you to know that what you did today, it means more than words can say. You have honored your mother, and in doing so you have honored my wife. That song, it will live on because of you." The girl looked up, a soft smile forming on her face. I promise I will keep playing it," she said. "I will make sure it is never forgotten." He nodded, a faint smile breaking through his usual stern expression. "Good, that is all I could ask. You have not only preserved the music, but you have also reminded us all of its true purpose. Thank you." The other judges approached her one by one, offering congratulations and kind words. Some were amazed at the emotion she had conveyed. Others were impressed by the courage she had shown in the face of criticism. But everyone agreed on one thing. This performance would be remembered long after the competition ended. Later, when the hall was emptying, the older judge asked the girl to stay behind for a moment. He led her to a small private room backstage. The walls were lined with old music sheets, photographs, and mementos of his late wife. He gestured toward them with a gentle hand. "These were hers," he said quietly. "All of these songs, all of these notes. They are pieces of her heart. And now, your mother preserved one of the most precious pieces for you. You've brought it back to life, and in doing so, you've brought back a memory I thought I would never see again." The girl looked around, awed by the room. She had never seen so many music sheets in one place, each one telling a story, each one carrying emotion. She realized how special it was that her mother had entrusted this song to her, and that she had been able to play it in a way that honored both her mother and the judge's late wife. I didn't know it would affect you like this," she said softly. "I just wanted to play it well for my mother." The judge shook his head slowly. "No, you played it perfectly. Not because of technique, but because of your heart. That is something that cannot be taught. That is something rare. That is something beautiful." For a long moment they sat in silence, surrounded by memories and music. It was a quiet, sacred kind of silence, filled with understanding and connection. The girl felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced harsh judgment, fear, and doubt, but she had stayed true to herself and to the music she loved. And now she understood that staying true was more important than perfection. Finally, the judge spoke again. "I want to make sure you continue to play this song and others like it. Share it with the world. Let it reach hearts the way it reached mine. Promise me that." "I promise," she said. her voice soft but determined. "I will play it wherever I can. I will make sure it is never forgotten." He nodded, a proud and emotional expression on his face. "Good, that is all I could hope for. You have done more than perform today. You have reminded me and everyone here of what music truly is." As they left the backstage room, the girl noticed the kind judge who had supported her earlier. She walked over to her and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me. I don't know if I could have done this without you." The judge smiled warmly. "You did this because of yourself. I just reminded you that it's okay to play from your heart, and today, you reminded all of us of that lesson." Outside the hall, the sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the street. The girl took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air on her face. She held her music book close, thinking of her mother, of the older judge, and of the song that had connected them all. She realized something important. Music was more than notes, more than competitions, more than applause. Music was connection, love, memory, and heart, and she had experienced all of that in one day. The older judge walked beside her for a moment, then stopped and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You have a gift," he said quietly. "Use it wisely, share it generously, and never forget that what you play can touch hearts in ways you cannot even imagine." She nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I will," she said. As she walked home that evening, the city lights reflecting in the puddles on the street, she felt something she had never felt before, a sense of purpose, pride, and connection. She had faced harsh judgment, self-doubt, and fear, but she had stayed true to herself and her mother's music, and in doing so she had changed lives, including her own. When she finally reached her small home, she placed the music book on her old piano, brushing her fingers over the keys softly. She played a few gentle notes, remembering the warmth of the hall, the eyes of the older judge, and the connection she had forged through music. Each note carried love, memory, and hope. Her father peeked into the room quietly, noticing her calm and peaceful expression. "You played beautifully," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "I didn't play for anyone else," she said. "I played for Mom, and it turned out that it reached someone else too." Her father nodded, understanding. "That's all that matters. You stayed true to yourself, and that's the most important thing." That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the day. She thought about the music hall, the judge, the audience, and her mother. She realized that she had learned something deeper than any technique or lesson. She had learned that music had the power to heal, to connect, and to remind people of love that never truly dies. And she knew that from that day forward, every time she played that song, or any song, it would carry a piece of her heart, a piece of her mother's, and a piece of everyone it touched. The next morning, she awoke early again, her heart full of purpose. She would continue to play, to learn, to share, and to honor the gift she had been given. She understood now that music was more than notes on a page. It was life itself. The older judge, meanwhile, walked into the hall again, his eyes lighter, his heart fuller. He knew that something extraordinary had happened, and he would never forget it. The young girl had reminded him of love, memory, and the beauty of music. And he was grateful, more than words could ever express. Together they had experienced something rare, a connection beyond judgment, beyond time, beyond loss. And in that connection, both of them had found hope, healing, and a renewed sense of purpose. The girl picked up her music book, touched the keys softly, and whispered, "Thank you, Mom." She smiled, knowing that her music would live on, not just for her mother, not just for the judge, but for anyone who would listen with their heart. And in that moment, the song, the memory, and the love it carried would never be forgotten.